right, if Ms. McLean Delaney could join as well. And now recognize Ms. Dexter of Oregon for her 5 minutes presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our ranking member. Today I'm offering 3 amendments rooted in a basic principle. Government should work for the people, not silence them, not shield corruption, and certainly not rip away healthcare. Let's start with what this GOP tax scam tries to take from the public, their voice. Under current law, communities can protest oil and gas leasing decisions that threaten their land, water, or climate. This bill would impose a $150 fee, plus more for extra pages or lease parcels, just to be heard. And let's be honest about what that is. A tax on public participation, a toll on free speech. And it won't deter billion-dollar oil companies. It will deter working people, people who love outdoor places. At the same time, Republicans are slashing royalty payments and handing billions in giveaway to the fossil fuel industry. That tells you everything you need to know about where their priorities lie. My amendment would strike this unjust protest fee from the bill and protect the public's right to be heard. Second, we must ensure accountability. I'm offering an amendment to allocate a modest 0.5% of new funds to the Department of Interior's Office of the Inspector General, a nonpartisan watchdog that saves taxpayers' money by rooting out waste, fraud, and abuse. This should be easy for Republicans to support. It's the same bipartisan provision they themselves championed by our current House Natural Resources Chair in 2021. It's simple. Let's ensure transparency and pass this amendment. And now I want to speak to what I believe is the most urgent and dangerous part of this legislation, its impact on healthcare. Before I came to Congress, I spent nearly 20 years caring for some of the sickest patients in our community. I've worked in emergency rooms. I know what happens when a system doesn't have the resources that it needs to serve its patients. That's why I'm offering an amendment to require states to report on how coverage losses under this bill would impact uncompensated care and emergency department wait times in safety net hospitals. If this bill were really only about ridding out waste, fraud, and abuse in Medicaid, we should welcome this kind of data. But we know the truth. This bill isn't about waste. It's about ripping healthcare away from nearly 14 million Americans and destabilizing the healthcare system for everyone else in the process. And for what? To give tax breaks to billionaires. Medicaid isn't just a lifeline for patients, it's a fundamental part of our healthcare infrastructure. Providers depend on it to stay open, to serve not only Medicaid patients, but you, me, everyone in our communities. Cutting Medicaid will mean clinics and hospitals in rural towns will shut down. Hospitals in cities will be over capacity. Seniors will be forced out of nursing facilities due to closures. And emergency rooms will go on divert, turning away people in crisis because there simply isn't enough space for people to be seen. We're talking about longer wait times for pediatric care, delays for life-saving cancer treatment, people suffering and dying, not because we don't have the tools to help them, but because we've made a political choice to take those tools away. These cuts will be devastating, and the consequences won't be statistics on a spreadsheet. They will be lives lost, futures cut short, and suffering that could have been prevented. And again, for what? Tax breaks for billionaires. I urge my Republican colleagues, show courage in this moment. Stand with the constituents who cannot afford to lose their voice and their health care. Support these amendments and defeat this outrageous and dangerous bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Louisiana for 5 minutes, Mr. Carter.
Well, okay. Let's start again. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. My first amendment, number 299, preserves environmental justice block grants that improve public health. The EPA has provided grants for more than 50 years that protect our constituents' public health and enhance their environment. This is especially true for the Environmental and Climate Justice Block Grant Program, which provides valuable funding that serves community centers, environmental rehabilitation projects, and public health revitalization initiatives that would otherwise not be possible. These projects are providing environmental and public health benefits in Democratic and Republican districts alike. However, this bipartisan bill ruthlessly claws back these funds and eliminates this vital program. Not only is this bill stealing people's health care, it's also making them sicker. My amendment will ensure that environmental and climate justice block grant projects that improve the health outcomes in low-income communities do not lose critical funding. If Republicans truly prioritize their constituents, they should easily agree with me that this funding is valuable and must be protected. My second amendment is amendment number 358, which would add to the text the bipartisan Next Generation 911 Act to the Republican budget reconciliation legislation before us today and fully fund programs using the proceeds from future spectrum auctions. Because of technology advances the telecommunications from the past 50 years, Americans can communicate today in ways weren't even contemplated when 911 system was first created. Yet, our 911 systems are stuck in the past. Our first responders are unable to utilize these tools we take for granted in this digital age. We are far behind. Police officers, firefighters, and emergency medical technicians who serve communities we represent deserve better. I cannot think of a better use of dollars raised from auctioning off public airwaves than to upgrade old, outdated public safety communication systems. I hope my colleagues will vote yes on this amendment to modernize our 911 systems for the 21st century. Congress should give FCC the authority to begin spectrum auctions now. Those proceeds need to help our constituents and first responders not pay for tax cuts for the ultra-rich. My third amendment is Amendment 373, which states no funds can be used to effectuate the detention or removal of citizens of the United States or any non-citizen whose legal status was determined or visa revoked due to exercising simply their right to speech, free speech, not breaking any laws, simply their right to free speech. Last month, I led a delegation of House and Senate members to 2 ICE processing centers in Louisiana to meet with individuals who had their legal status revoked and remain in immigration detention simply because they exercised their right to free speech. If these individuals can be jailed for exercising their First Amendment rights, any person in this country is under the same threat. Now, let me be clear. I do not support any hate speech of any kind. Speech that supports anti-Semitism or calls for violence, I am totally opposed to. The individuals we met with were very clear. They don't support these matters either. My fourth amendment and last amendment is number 357, which states that 100% of Medicaid cuts resulting from waste, fraud, and abuse will go directly back into programs to strengthen Medicaid for generations to come. My Republican friends say that they want to help the people that Medicaid was, quote unquote, intended for, the most vulnerable. And to that I say, put your money where your mouth is. But we all know they won't. It's always been about enriching billionaires while ripping health care away from seniors, children, mothers, and those with disabilities. Republicans now say that Medicaid shameful. We will put the most vulnerable at risk. That's why we keep spinning false narratives about waste, fraud, and abuse. But don't take my word for it. Take it from Republican Senator Josh Hawley, and I quote, "Will Republicans be the majority of the people or a permanent minority speaking only for C-suite?" So, if the goal is to protect Medicaid and root out waste, fraud, and abuse, we should have no opposition to support my amendment to reinvesting these funds into Medicaid. I have one final quote, ma'am, and I know I'm shortly over, but I want to remind people, I'm told yesterday that our president, Donald Trump, said, and I quote, please forgive my language, "Don't fuck with Medicaid." I hope he was serious, and I hope this committee takes it serious too. I yield.
Carter, Mr. Kuda, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ranking Member McGovern, I submit one amendment today, 159, protecting rural Americans from SNAP cuts. Every day, millions of Americans go to bed hungry. For 14 straight years, the United States has led the developed world in food insecurity. In 2023, over 1 in 4 Americans reported struggling to afford food. Think about that. In the richest nation on earth, 85 million people are missing meals. And where is this pain felt most deeply? Rural America, small towns, farming communities, places like Hawaii's 2nd District, where food is grown, but life is hard. 87% of the counties with the highest food insecurity are rural. Families face fewer job opportunities, fewer doctors, fewer grocery stores, and now even fewer lifelines. And Republicans want to make it worse. This isn't just a bad bill. It's a big bad bill. It's a big ugly bill, a brutal assault on rural families, working parents, seniors, kids. The GOP plan is to slash $313 billion from SNAP, gut Medicaid, rip lifelines out of the hands of people just trying to survive, and hand billions in tax breaks to the ultra-wealthy. All this as part of the GOP tax scam 2.0, a reckless giveaway to billionaires that will add $5 trillion to our national debt. $5 trillion in tax breaks for the rich, paid for by taking food off tables and putting health care out of reach for working Americans. This isn't fiscal policy. It's moral failure. It's the wealthiest 10% cashing in at the expense of the poorest, most vulnerable, hardworking people who labor every day to hold on to life in communities too often forgotten. Let me tell you about Anna, a constituent of mine from the rural west side of Oahu. She and her husband run a small family business. Last year, just $200 more in monthly sales pushed them over the limit for SNAP. $200. That tiny increase cost their children meals. Anna told me she had to measure every scoop of rice at dinner. She couldn't say yes when her youngest child asked for a second helping of food. She sent her kids to school hungry. Months later, after their sales dropped again, Anna reapplied. They were approved, and she cried. But now Anna and her husband wonder every day, should we sell our home? Should we leave our community? That's the America we're creating, where a family's survival depends on a spreadsheet and, sadly, declining sales. Anna isn't a cheat. She isn't lazy. She's not gaming the system. She is the system, the engine and the heart of rural America, working, sacrificing, raising kids, building a future, and yet this bill punishes her. SNAP works. It feeds families and fuels local economies. Every SNAP dollar we know generates over $1.50 in economic activity. It supports farmers, grocers, small-town businesses. It breaks cycles of poverty, and Medicaid keeps rural hospitals open, keeps parents and kids healthy. It keeps people alive. Cutting these programs isn't just cruel, it's anti-American. But here's the truth. The cruelty is the point, because this bill is about priorities. The GOP's priorities is clear. Cater to the billionaires, crush the working families, and let's call it policy. They're ready to hand out massive tax breaks to the wealthiest Americans while robbing the rest of the country of food and care. That's not a budget. That's a betrayal. So yes, this bill will devastate rural America. It will mean more hunger, more closed clinics, more families like Anna's forced to consider giving up their homes, their communities, their dignity, so that billionaires can buy a third yacht and pay even less in taxes. But we have a choice. We can do the right thing. We can stand with the families who work hard and ask only for a fair shot. We can vote for policies that invest in people, not punish them. We can reject the GOP tax scam. We can protect SNAP. We can defend Medicaid. And we can refuse to balance budgets on the backs of people who can least afford it. This amendment is our choice. If you are confident rural America will not see SNAP cuts or decreased benefits, as the chair of the Agriculture Committee has claimed, then this amendment will do no harm. Vote yes. But if you have a concern, and quite frankly, a conscience, vote yes. Reject this big, bad bill. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Ms. Bonamici, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My amendment, which is number 24, is pro-family, pro-children, and pro-mom. It guarantees that this bill will not take away nutrition benefits for moms and hungry kids in the Special Supplemental Nutrition Program for Women, Infants, and Children, or WIC. Federal nutrition programs like WIC and SNAP and school meals are investments in the health, learning, and development of children and young adults in communities across the country and are some of the most successful tools we have for reducing child hunger. These nutrition programs have been associated with improved educational outcomes and reduced food insecurity, which is especially important for children from low-income and food-insecure families. And it's widely known that WIC contributes to healthier births, nutritious diets, and improved infant feeding practices, better health care for children, and higher academic achievement. The benefits are indisputable. So WIC has served as a lifeline for many mothers and their young children, and I urge my colleagues to support my amendment. I would now like to make a few comments on amendments that I am either co-sponsoring or supporting. There is one by Ranking Member Bobby Scott to protect American children from going hungry with regard to the proposed cuts to SNAP. Yesterday, the Urban Institute released a new report highlighting that as many as 18.3 million children could lose access to free school meals as a result of the harmful provisions in this bill. And we know that every congressional district has children who are hungry. Families are working hard, but the income isn't keeping up with the cost. So I hope we can adopt Mr. Scott's amendment number 184. I also want to speak in support of a amendment that is going to be introduced or has been introduced by Representative Sykes to strike the language in the bill that cuts Medicaid. In Oregon, 1 in 3 people are covered by Medicaid, including 57% of Oregon children, and make no mistake, if you rip away health care from millions of Americans, people will die. Rural hospitals will close, cancer patients will go without treatment, and I will support this amendment, and proud to support this amendment. I also want to raise an issue in the amendment that is introduced by Representative Rivas, number 215. This is an amendment that will fix a catastrophic policy that's tucked quietly into this bill that would let the world's most powerful technology go unchecked for the next decade. This is a blank check for big tech. It would, and the bill, as written, will block state and local governments from regulating artificial intelligence for 10 years. That is a long time. That is a decade of risk. Let's be clear, we do not have federal policies or governance laws on data privacy, security, and bias. And I served on the bipartisan House AI task force, and we spent a long time studying these issues. And our report that was signed by both Republicans and Democrats explicitly warns against blanket and impulsive federal preemption of state AI policy. And I quote, "Without comprehensive federal AI or data privacy laws, states are well positioned to address gaps, tailor protections, and respond to emerging harms." But this bill ignores that bipartisan advice. Yesterday, 40 state attorneys general, including Oregon's Dan Rayfield, sent a bipartisan letter opposing this provision because of the unchecked harm it will cause. And let's talk about what that could look like. An algorithm that denies a disabled person access to housing and no state agency could intervene. A company that designs generative AI to imitate voices or faces without consent. States couldn't stop it. A hiring platform that discriminates by race or gender. Under this bill, if a company deliberately designs an algorithm that causes foreseeable harm, they'd be legally unaccountable, and it would leave policymakers and the public flying blind as a handful of corporations consolidate power over rapidly advancing technology. And I'm not talking about machines. I'm talking about civil rights, consumer safety, child protection, elections, employment, and more. The House AI Task Force made it clear we should empower good AI policy at the state level, not block it. This amendment strikes the provision and gets government out of the way so states can protect their people. Let's test whether Congress stands with the public or with the powerful. I also have a few bills I want to mention that, or excuse me, a few amendments that I'm co-sponsoring. One by Mr. Byer to keep energy costs low by taking two of the most successful energy policies in history, the production tax credit and the investment tax credit, protecting those. Also, Mr. Byer's amendment protecting bipartisan clean energy tax credits. I also want to support, be on record as supporting Ranking Member Bobby Scott's amendment number 261 that makes it harder for strikes the language that makes it harder for students to access high-quality education. And one more, Madam Chair, with your indulgence, I want to support the amendment by my Oregon colleague, Representative Bynum, that ensures the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau retains current funding for protecting student borrowers. And I yield back.
Ms. Bonamici. The order now is Goodlander, Stansberry, Delaney, and Tlaib. Okay? Goodlander.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Ranking Member McGovern, for the opportunity to be here today on behalf of the people of New Hampshire's 2nd District to offer a common sense, one-sentence amendment to this truly big and catastrophically bad bill. We know the bill is big. I brought a copy with me. It doesn't fit on this very big table in front of me. This bill is catastrophically bad because of what it does and what it fails to do, and that's where my amendment comes in. This bill is catastrophically bad because we know what it's going to do to 14 million Americans who will lose health coverage. The biggest cuts to health care in American history. It's going to hurt our kids, people with disabilities, pregnant women, seniors. It's going to jack up health care costs for everyone. Rural hospitals in my state are going to close and people are going to die. We know this bill is catastrophically bad because of what it's going to do to the more than 10 million Americans who are at risk of losing access to food because of the biggest cuts to SNAP in American history. We're talking about kids, about veterans, about hardworking people all across our country and in the most rural parts of my district, in Berlin, in Stewartstown, in Winchester. People are going to lose access to food. And for what? To give another big tax giveaway to big corporations and to billionaires. This bill also is going to bring about the biggest deficit increase in American history, $3.8 trillion, and that's trillion with a T, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office, and it's going to add trillions of dollars to the national debt. So this bill is bad for all the things it will do, but one of the things this bill will not do, and another reason why it's catastrophically bad, is what it fails to do to really make government work better for hardworking people and to actually cut down on waste, fraud, and abuse. And that's where my straightforward, common sense, one-sentence amendment comes in. Title II of this big bill provides nearly $150 billion to the Department of Defense, and does this, mind you, at a moment when that department is in a state of pure and utter chaos under the leadership of a person who has no business serving as the Secretary of Defense. That's a lot of money, $150 billion. It's 10 times the state of New Hampshire's biennial budget. It's also, I should note, $50 billion above what the House Armed Services Committee was instructed to spend in this bill. And I read every bill I vote on, and it's $50 billion above. So I'm offering a straightforward amendment. It's one sentence that would simply require the Department of Defense, before it is able to spend the additional $50 billion, to do what it is already required to do by law and what it has failed to do under law for decades now, and that is to pass an independent audit. This is about basic government oversight, but the Department of Defense has failed 7 audits. It is the only federal department that has failed an audit, and it also accounts for more than half of our discretionary spending. We're talking about $1 trillion. This is not right. If you really want to talk about cutting waste, fraud, and abuse, I'd ask the question, isn't ensuring a clean audit of the Pentagon a top priority? If you want to know whether we're actually wasting money, an audit is going to help us do exactly that. So look, at the end of the day, this is about It's about military readiness, and that's something that our national security depends upon. It's something our economic security depends upon. It's also about the public's trust. Small businesses across this country, people across America, have got to pass an audit to keep doing what they do. The Pentagon should be held to the same standard. And it's the public's trust that our democracy depends on. And so with that, I would say this big, truly big and catastrophically bad bill cannot be cured with one amendment, but this is a step towards progress on what I think we all share, a goal we all share, cutting waste, fraud, and abuse. That is not what this bill does. And with that, I yield back. Thank you.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, Ranking Member, members of the committee. Before I get started, I just want to observe that we've been here for almost 12 hours, and I want to take a moment to thank all of the staff who've been holding it down for the last 12 hours in this room. And I want to also observe that I count exactly 2 Republicans in this room, while literally dozens of Democrats have sat here all night and all day to have 5 minutes in front of this committee to speak our piece on behalf of the American people. So I have a lot of ground to cover. If it's not obvious already, not only am I a no on this bill, I am a hell no. Let me tell you why. This bill puts a massive permanent tax break in place for the ultra wealthy and corporations on the backs of working Americans. It will literally make the poor people of this country poor while the rich get richer. It will give billions of dollars in kickbacks to defense contractors, private prisons, and big tech. It gives cuts to life-saving programs, Medicaid and healthcare, which all of you said you wouldn't cut for months, and here we are. Food assistance, school lunches, Pell Grants. It will decimate protections for the environment, NEPA, public lands, judicial review, climate and clean energy. It decimates protections for our federal workers. It makes them at will, and it threatens their retirement. It threatens our consumers. It eviscerates the federal budget. And, Madam Chair, despite what I have heard here for many hours of lying, it will put into place the largest increase in deficit spending this country has ever seen, ever. That is what this bill does, and that is why I oppose it. I'm here to present 6 amendments, one of which was voted down by the Republicans in oversight that would actually protect Medicaid, Social Security, veterans benefits, and food assistance. I'm also here to fight for a bill, an amendment to this bill that would make it impossible for people like Elon Musk and special government employees to self-deal and exploit the government for their own personal gain. I'm also here to present an amendment that would restore the protections for our tribal nations, because notwithstanding what I heard the chairman say in the dark of night in this room, this bill takes away the judicial rights of our tribal nations to defend their sacred lands and their tribal trust and treaty responsibilities, and it is shameful. It is absolutely shameful. I am also here to offer an amendment to restore climate funding that was cut out of our national budget, and I am here to present an amendment which the Republicans have already voted on in a number of different places and spaces that would make it impossible for our foreign adversaries to mine here in the United States and take advantage of our system. These are but a small offering to a 1,000-page bill that will literally kill Americans. This is but a small offering in the 500 amendments that my colleagues and I have waited all night and all day to present in this committee. So let me be perfectly clear. This bill will hurt the American people. It will raise the debt. It will give permanent tax breaks to the ultra wealthy. It will put billions of dollars into the pockets of Donald Trump's friends. It will cut life-saving programs. It will decimate protections for our communities. And it is happening on your watch, and we are here to fight it every step of the way in this committee, on the floor, in our communities, and we will not stop fighting. And with that, I yield back.
Thank you, Chairwoman, and thank you, Ranking Member McGovern. And thanks to all the staff, I agree as well, who've been here. I got here around 3 in the morning, and I echo what many of my Democratic colleagues have said. But I just have to say, as a preamble, you know, many of the things I've said will be repeating others, but my heart is heavy. As a freshman member from Maryland, but grew up in this great state of Idaho and have lived here for 30 years. I've never seen anything like this in Washington. And I must say, I ran on common sense, common ground in my campaign, and there's none of that right here on Washington, on Capitol Hill. But that takes common ground, takes shared truths, and starting at least the same platform and the same set of facts, and shared value outputs. And I would think that we should come back together to really look at those things. The way in which we have not been able to really have hearings and an ability to really think and probe into all these issues is so important going forward. So my amendment, H313, is really about ensuring that children and families will continue to receive the food they need despite the proposals put forward in the package. In this country, I do think that we all agree, and many of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in the Ag Committee believe that no child in this country should go hungry. My Republican colleagues repeatedly said that this package would not result in the kids going hungry and that benefits would remain whole for them. My amendment takes them at their word, and it seeks to ensure that no cuts to SNAP can be made unless the USDA and states confirm that these cuts will not lead to a reduction in benefits for households with kids. Taking Republicans at their word to prevent benefits that I would suspect they would want. In some nationally, 42 million currently depend on food assistance programs. And in my district, 1 in 9 households depends on SNAP. Half of them are children. This isn't just about ending hunger. It's about dignity, it's about opportunity, and it's about being able to concentrate in school and being able to thrive. And if you want to talk about economics, as we said before, SNAP pays for itself in economic benefits and health benefits. For every dollar in my district, but across the country, spent on SNAP, $1.50 comes back into our economies. And that means many of my farmers in District 6 sell into the food markets. It goes back to 2,700 national retailers and back to our truckers. Cutting SNAP hurts, not helps our national economy. And these cuts will even be more apparent in rural communities. And by the way, in rural communities, there is going to be a tsunami of issues that is going to impact them, not just with SNAP, but with Medicaid and all these core funding cuts, and it's going to hit our states as well. So let me just put another thing in it, and maybe it's the lawyer in me, but I dispute the GOP constant messaging that this is about financial discipline and tackling the deficit. None of these cuts to SNAP or to Medicaid or social net programs result in this objective. The numbers do not add up, because we all know that it is widely acknowledged that this current proposal is projected to increase the budget by nearly $3 trillion through 2034 by locking in tax cuts and spending increases that outweigh reductions in Medicaid and SNAP funding. So let me put a finer point on this. It will strip $18 billion in benefits from households with children. It will harm 1 in 5 kids who rely on SNAP, and it lowers the age by which a child is considered dependent from 18 to 7. No one I know would argue that an 8 or a 10 or a 12-year-old is not dependent on their parents for food, housing, or care. And the authors of this bill have exempted families within this new definition of dependent only if they are married or living in the same household. But what about single or unmarried parents who are doing their best? This bill leaves them behind. Last, the bill prevents future increases to the Thrifty Food Plan. $37 billion will be cut from food assistance for the next decade, and that includes slashing $1 billion from summer EBT, which is a lifeline for millions of kids as they head into summer. I repeat, children will be hungrier over the summer. So it's about feeding our kids and about their future and our country's future. If you'll also allow me, Chairwoman Fox, I do not serve on the Energy and Commerce Committee, but I spent the bulk of my life as a child advocate at Common Sense Media. Common Sense is a nonprofit dedicated to looking at how media impacts the health and well-being of our nation's children vis-a-vis media. And the reports that came today about Sykes' bill, H215, is really important because we have to stand ahead of making sure that AI and the most recent proposals that it would block states from regulating it is really, really important not to. 140 organizations have already stood up against it. And I would also say for our nation's kids, we need to look at that. In closing, thank you. I yield back.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and I, echo so much of what my colleagues have said, but I want to bring my district into this room. They're never going to be able to sit here in this audience and express just, anger that they feel that yet again we're turning our backs to them and not putting them before polluters, before billionaires, and so much more. The reality is, and Madam Chair, and this is to everyone here, it is not just us saying it. It's nonpartisan organization looking at the numbers, looking at this budget. And it is our residents of all different likes, because to me, Medicaid is nonpartisan. I have met people of all different likes and backgrounds that are dependent on Medicaid. I have met so many people that are on SNAP, Madam Chair, and for all of my colleagues to understand, you all know many of our residents survivor mode. I'm not going to here to do shaming and blaming. The reality is we have broken systems in place, and we wonder why people look at Congress and shake their heads and the approval ratings are so low. It's because we don't put them first. And so I offered 6 amendments, Madam Chair, and I hope you all seriously take them into consideration. I have no health care cuts for moms and babies. This is important. As a founder of the Congressional Mamas Caucus, when I look at over 40% of births in our country are covered by Medicaid, but that's also prenatal care, postpartum. I mean, all the different things that you see. And I say this because, again, I'm bringing my district here. We have one of the worst infant mortality crises, and I mean, look at the crisis that we have in our country, but even in my backyard. And it's because we don't have the kind of care that we have. And Medicaid is a Band-Aid, y'all. It really is. Because we do have an inhumane, cruel healthcare system that's driven by profit and greed and not about healthcare. That's why a lot of my residents don't even call it a healthcare anymore. They call it sick care, Madam Chair. And so now we're about to rip the Band-Aid off. So my amendment says, do not cut prenatal and postnatal care. Again, tackling infant mortality is nonpartisan. Every community is, again, seeing that our children are not reaching the age of 1, and there's a reason to that. And again, it's because we're not doing our job here in Congress. The other amendment, and it's super important, is no money for polluters. I want to reiterate to all of you, again, my community, the majority of them are frontline communities. We have one of the worst air qualities in the state of Michigan, in Wayne County, that I represent. And we're making people sicker, and then now we're saying, we're not going to cover the fact that, again, we've allowed corporate polluters to be unchecked. You should see the lack of enforcement, because the bills are written in a way they slap their hands, they pay a fine, it's part of doing business. But when you go to read to a third grade class in my district, and I always tell them, they ask me what my job is, and I tell them I'm trying to make sure we have clean air and how many of you have asthma. A third of the class will raise their hand, Madam Chair. A third of them. And you look at the attendance rates and so forth. The other is really important. I really believe that we need no more aid to billionaires. I'm calling it that because I think that's how you all see it. They don't need it. The corporations don't need it. Some of them have not paid federal income tax for years. They don't need it. They're going to be okay, I promise. But I still remember the first Black woman ever elected in Congress, Shirley Chisholm, say that children can't learn if they're hungry. And I'm telling you, that is very real, but also children can't learn if they're being poisoned because they don't have clean water or clean air. And so I think it's incredibly important. My other amendment expand but don't restrict Medicaid. It is important to understand the importance of what Medicaid does right now. Again, the Band-Aid that I talked about, and we try to keep it tight. I know all of us that are fighting for Medicaid and making sure that we're expanding it and making it, again, closer to something a lot more humane. But I think it's incredibly important to understand this is life-saving. I've never had this many people in my community call me, parents with special needs children, petrified. They're so scared that we're going to put Amazon and FedEx and all these other corporations before them. That's what they're afraid of. And we wonder why they're so angry.
My other amendment, again, is around no money for Pentagon, because I want to talk to you all about this. In my community, I tell them, don't worry, guess what? Guess what? There is one budget that got an increase. Which budget is that? The Pentagon budget. Can't pass audits, Madam Chair. 7 audits in a row. The last audit, the last failed audit, showed that over half of the assets of the Pentagon are unaccounted for. Unaccounted for. So we have money for bombs and wars. And shame on any of my colleagues that own stocks in war manufacturing. You shouldn't even be voting on this bill. That's a conflict of interest. But Madam Chair, it's important to understand, we can't prioritize to build ships that can't float, planes that can't even fly in the rain. Trillions of dollars are going to that. And we're going to go ahead and fund it $150 billion more dollars into to talk about waste and inefficiency. It is cool for us to put more money in a budget that can't pass an audit, but we're going to go ahead and throw people off of Medicaid and SNAP. With that, Madam Chair, I yield.
Thank you. Thanks to all of you. Let me see if there are questions. Do you have any questions? No. Okay, Mr. McGovern.
Yeah, Madam Chair, first I want to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a letter from Jacek Furman, an economist and the former chair of the Council of Economic Advisors and the deputy director of the National Economic Council. In his letter, Mr. Furman shares an outlook of what this horrible bill will mean for our economy, and he writes, and I quote, "The legislation would drive up mortgage interest rates and inflation, lower economic growth, and ultimately require Congress to pass additional tax increases or benefit reductions. All of this would further hurt the working and middle class." So, Madam Chair, more expensive mortgages, higher inflation, basic needs like food and health care ripped away from people in need, all to give us more tax breaks for billionaires. I think it's shameful, and I think this bill will actually will hurt real everyday people. I ask unanimous consent.
Without objection.
And then the other thing I'm going to say is, I mean, let's remind ourselves why we're here, right? We're dealing with a bill that does a million different things. It's so wide in its scope. But, I mean, I think what has kind of brought us all together is our deep concern over people losing their health care, people losing their food assistance, all to pay for tax cuts for billionaires. And that's just unacceptable. And, I mean, we wouldn't be who we are as Democrats if we didn't fight this with every ounce of energy we have. There are other things in this bill. Ms. Bonamici, I'm glad you brought up the AI aspect of this. I am scared out of my mind that there will be a 10-year moratorium on states' ability to be able to kind of regulate AI in their within their boundaries. Congress should do it, but we can't get our act together here. So the idea that we just we'll let it go wild, I mean, there's some real dangers to our kids, to our communities, and so I thank you for raising that. But again, you know, I mean, I'm grateful to all of you for sticking this out. You know, we have been talking amongst ourselves about how incredible it is to see all of you just stay here and remain here in solidarity and to, you know, be able to present your amendments. I think the American people appreciate it, and so I support all your amendments. Again, I thank you for being here. I yield back my time.
Later. 478.
Okay, thank you. I just want to echo the ranking member's remarks. There are dozens of members still waiting. We really, really appreciate your passion, your amendments, which are so well taken, everybody bringing their expertise that would have been probably better served if we'd been able to use regular order, use committee structure to try to work on consensus bills. But it is so important that your constituents hear what you would do if our colleagues across the aisle were willing to work in a bipartisan manner, and just how much we could accomplish if that were an option around here. So thank you all. Appreciate it.
Mr. Neguse, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't have any questions. I just would, again, share the sentiments expressed by our ranking member and Ms. Scanlon, and our deep appreciation to our members of the House Democratic Caucus for hanging in and staying as long as you have. Again, we started this hearing at 1 a.m. It's now 1 p.m., so 12 hours later, and there are a number of you who have been here the entire time, all so that you could, as Representative Stansberry so eloquently put it, speak for 5 minutes on behalf of the communities that you serve and to present very thoughtful, exceptional amendments that are developed by virtue of your expertise in your particular areas of expertise. And so I would just say thank you, and I hope that our colleagues on the other side might perhaps reconsider the closed nature of the rule. I suspect they won't, but hope springs eternal. So I thank my colleagues for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Neguse, and thanks to all of you. I also thank you for coming and staying for this period of time, and you're now excused. Mr. Jackson, Mr. Fields, Ms. Dean, Ms. Schulten, Mr. Mervan, Mr. Tonko, Mr. Mannion, Ms. Wasserman Schultz, if you could come into the seats these people are vacating, please.